Terrific. Great. Very good. We are off and running. So thank you all for joining today. We will get right into it, talking about conversations that matter, how to approach advanced care planning, especially in Colorado, and especially in the context of COVID-19. As Kari mentioned, please do chat in your questions or think about them. We'd love to have an interactive discussion. So I'm going to present an overview about advanced care planning, some Colorado resources, and then we'll have discussion. I think we have so much going on right now, a lot of information overload, and I wanted to create a little space for you to reflect on your own personal experiences. So I have a few conversation questions that will be internal because of the nature of a webinar, but have you personally cared for someone who has been diagnosed with a serious or chronic illness? When you have that person in mind, what was that decision-making like? What was your role like as a care partner? Then thinking for yourself, have you had a conversation about what is important to you if you are seriously ill? And I hope you can hear me. I know we're getting a little background noise. So in terms of your background and needs, here are a few other questions for reflection. Wondering, in this time of COVID-19, what things are under our control? Some of the things under our control are to designate a healthcare agent, to think about if you are the agent for someone, have you recently asked that person what would be important to them if they became seriously ill in the next, period of time where COVID-19 is at the front of all of our minds. And of course, throughout this, what questions come up for you as you listen to this presentation? So I wanted to make sure that we're all on the same page. Advanced care planning is not about end of life, in the moment decision-making per se. Instead, it's ahead of time, the opportunity to support adults at any age or health state, no matter what our diagnoses may be, in thinking about, understanding, sharing our personal values, our life goals, and our preferences regarding future medical care. Because the word care planning is in there, I often get the question of, well, are we talking about caregiving? Are we talking about long-term care placement? And so I'll just remind us that this is really about thinking about our personal values in advance and how those values may influence our preferences for specific medical treatments in the future. I wanted to share some of how we do here in Colorado. 2 years ago, 3 years ago, there was a survey done by the Colorado Health Institute, I think. And you can see that when asked if people have an advance directive, older adults, 2 out of 3, have had a chance to complete an advance directive. 30% of younger adults have done so, and on average across our population, about 35% have. Now, my hope, the silver lining of COVID-19 might be that as a state, as a population, we could get, higher than 80%, that all of us would have had a chance to think about what's important and even to create an advance directive. So these are the steps that I'm gonna walk us through. Sometimes people say, well, what's just a straightforward checklist of what do I need to do for advanced care planning? Often there's so much emphasis of, well, what document do I need to complete? And you can see that's number 4. So instead, I'll walk us through, consider your values and preferences. Secondly, choose a trusted decision maker as your medical durable power of attorney, which on these slides you'll see abbreviated MDPOA, and sometimes we talk about the MDPOA form. Third, talk about your values and preferences with that person or alternates that you trust. Fourth, complete the documents that are right for you, and I'll introduce you to several that are freely available and accessible from a health literacy perspective. And then fifth, share copies with your medical durable power of attorney, your loved ones, family of choice, others who are involved, and also your healthcare team or healthcare system. And there are ways to do that, even when at this point in time, we're doing a lot of our medical care through telehealth, telephone, virtually. There are still some systems that are really working to make it possible to share these documents. So I'll remind us that the big picture goal of why it matters to have these types of advanced care planning conversations is that we want to honor preferences. It is very difficult when we don't know what someone wants from a medical perspective, and I worry that I may be initiating a treatment plan that is not aligned with what someone actually wants. So the goal is to help ensure that people receive the medical care that's consistent with who they are. A lot of people, when we've done population surveys, a lot of people are concerned about wanting quality of life rather than perhaps every breath or how long they live. But it's important for each of us to think about where we stand on that spectrum and how that changes over time. That's why we often have to circle back to these conversations. Many people also want to die surrounded by loved ones. And that's an important consideration, especially when many hospitals and nursing facilities, residential facilities have no visitor policies or limited visitor policies. So these are tough decisions and discussions to have upfront, but ultimately can be helpful if this is really, a key point for you. And then many want to stay at home rather than other medical settings. And I know many, as a geriatrician, I know many of our families are trying to think through, well, is the right decision to have my loved one come back home if they've been living in a nursing care facility or independent living or assisted living residence. And so I think those decisions can also be important to have ahead of time and to start thinking through some of the details of what would be involved. So I'm going to walk us through these steps. And of course, these will be available as the recording, and I'm happy to share this PowerPoint so that you have it as reference also on Civic's webpage. So step one is to think about what's important to you. And this can include some of the aspects of what makes us people and humans, our faith beliefs, our worldview, our experiences, our legacy, what gives us meaning, what brings us joy, different challenging situations that have been experiences of growth or struggle or even suffering can influence the things that are important to us. And then you could also think about who makes up your circle of support and who you want involved or not involved in decision making. Sometimes this can be summed up with a starter question of what matters to me in life is, and then you share what's important to you, or think about it, and then what matters to me if I'm seriously ill, or if I know my time is limited, or if I can't make decisions for myself. So you could sort of modify this question to get into these reflective spaces to consider what's important to you. I'm showing here the conversation starter kit. This is a readily available resource that has even just some worksheets and gives some question prompts and raises some things that maybe you want to think about and then can use that around your kitchen table or wherever is comfortable to think it through and then even talk about it. This is an example of a 2-page version of the conversation starter kit. It's available on our website, Colorado Care Planning, which I will tell you more about. There's also a version about how to talk with your healthcare provider, how to make decisions in the context of dementia or cognitive impairment. And the starter kit is also available in other languages. So those are available on the National Conversation Project website. So step 2, as I've already alluded to, is to share. After you've had a chance to reflect on what's important to you, then think about how you can start the conversation. And the conversation starter kit walks you through some of these steps of thinking about who would you like to talk with, when's a good time to talk, and these days many of us are in more frequent contact with our loved ones, even across the country and around the world. And this might be something that you incorporate into one of those weekly or daily check-ins. And discuss your wishes and preferences. You don't have to do it all one time. That can feel really overwhelming. But here are some questions that you might want to cover. What matters most to you if you're sick? What treatments would you want or not want? And sometimes that can be big picture treatments. You know, I wouldn't want to have CPR. I wouldn't want to be on a ventilator. And it's important, as you may be thinking about not wanting certain treatments or wanting certain treatments, that you share with your family, your decision makers, the why behind it, so that then in the moment they know how to speak on your behalf. Because as we know, there can be a role for these medical treatments. So it's really important for you to express the reason why a treatment may be something you want or don't want. And I really encourage you to think about the quality of life that is behind your preference. And then how involved would you like to be in decisions is also important. You know, medical decision makers, the MDPOA is the person who the doctors look to if you are not able to make decisions, speak them on your own behalf. However, even with capacity, you may choose to defer and you may want increased input from other people. So that's also a choice that all of us have. So in terms of choosing a decision maker, this slide shows, you know, some different aspects that you could consider in who makes a good decision maker. I'm often asked, you know, does it have to be a family member? No. Does it have to be someone who lives locally? Also no. We can use technology to connect with people. We do want someone who's available and someone who you trust and someone who knows you well. And so often that is someone who is of closer proximity, but it certainly doesn't have to be. The most important thing is that you trust them. And then also thinking about an alternate or multiple alternates. So step 4 is to write it down. There are a couple different forms that I'll introduce here. I've alluded to that medical durable power of attorney, where you can name decision makers. And then there's a living will, which both of these together are types of advance directives. The living will specifically guides treatments that you would or would not want. Colorado, it's important to remember, for any of us who are 18 years or older, we do not have a default decision maker. It does not automatically go to a parent, a spouse, a sibling, a child. So it's very important then to think about who you want and to write it down to create that medical durable power of attorney. If you don't have that paper, you don't have an agent. The medical team can often use someone when you have decision-making capacity orally said who you would want. We can do some things with that person. Again, I really encourage you to set up the medical durable power of attorney. This is an example of a fairly straightforward one-page form. What's nice in Colorado is that we have a little bit less restriction than some other states. You can see that on this form, it is signed by the declarant. That's the person completing the form, where you list who your medical power of attorneys would be. On the flip side of this form, there's the option for witnesses, but it does not require witnesses, and it does not require a notary. Doesn't have to be done with an attorney or a doctor. However, these forms are often available through different sources like your healthcare clinic, and also we have them available at Colorado Care Planning. In fact, just today, the form that we've posted on the website is a fillable PDF, which will allow you to sign. So if you're someone who on your computer, you can download it, and then you can add an electronic signature on that PDF and save it, then you don't even have to print it out. So then step 5, once you have created advanced care planning documents, we really encourage you to make sure you're talking about them and then also share them with relevant folks. Share them with your decision makers, potentially schedule an appointment or engage in a telehealth appointment to talk about this with your primary care team and other specialists. And many patient portals may have opportunity for you even to upload the document through that secure process. So just as a circling back to this journey, this checklist, I've listed it here again, where we really want you to be able to focus on values and what's important. And it can be that we circle back to various steps of these and we update the discussions, perhaps update who our decision makers are, update the documents. If you have multiple documents, the most recent one is the one that the doctors will use, and several of the documents have embedded into them language that they revoke prior documents. So I've alluded to this, but Colorado Care Planning is a free, accessible website where we've created a roadmap that outlines these steps. You can sort of see here that nudge to think about your values, choose a decision maker, write down your wishes, make medical choices, and to share your wishes. So one way that you can also create an advanced care planning document that is appropriate for individuals who have serious illness and already know what treatments they would not want, especially things like CPR or intensive care unit level treatments, is the Colorado MOST form. So sometimes this is lumped in to an advanced directive, though one distinguishing factor is that these medical orders need to be completed with a healthcare provider, specifically a physician, nurse practitioner, or physician assistant, and the medical orders are immediately effective. This is similar, can work alongside the Colorado CPR directive if someone wants a do not resuscitate order. And we really encourage that when you're having a conversation with a medical provider about these preferences, that you also let them know, if you have existing advanced directives, because we want to make sure that these forms are in alignment and not in conflict. So a few things just to remember about the MOST form, and I'm happy to take any specific questions. This is just an overview, is that even though the medical form creates orders, we also think about it as a tool for a conversation. So again, we don't want it to just be check boxes, but an opportunity for an individual and their family of choice and their healthcare team to have shared decision making about what are my preferences for care in the context of my serious medical situation, my prognosis, my potential for benefit or no benefit from things like CPR or ventilator or other procedures that are listed on the MOST form. So it's incorrect if you've ever been told that the MOST form is the primary form you need. Instead, I highly recommend the medical power of attorney as the form that every Coloradan should have. And that's alluded to here. The MOST form is not for everyone, and it's also always voluntary. So frequently, the MOST form may come up if someone is admitted to a skilled nursing facility or assisted living residence. However, it should never be required as part of that admissions process. So I just share this bit of knowledge that the form is always voluntary. These conversations are always voluntary, and the MOST form is really designed to quickly communicate to the person, their care team, emergency medical services, the hospital-based team, that if someone who is at risk for a life-threatening clinical event because of their underlying medical illnesses, that those specific treatment preferences are quickly known. again, primarily, would someone want CPR or not? And then section B is, would someone want to be hospitalized? If their illness became so severe, would they want to be in an intensive care unit? Or have they already decided that if I get that sick, where it looks like I might need a ventilator, please let's shift to comfort-oriented care. And I recognize that that treatment is not beneficial in helping me to reach my values and goals for my quality of life. So that's a brief overview of how I see the most form appropriately used. So for those of us who are more visual, here's a way of sort of putting this all together, thinking back to I'm on my ACP journey. I want to have conversations, and I also want to make it clear. I want to figure out which forms are appropriate given my health situation. So you can see at the top there that for all adults, I recommend completing an advance directive, and especially the one that picks the medical durable power of attorney. And then it's appropriate to continue the conversations and update perhaps as our life changes, as our power of attorney availability changes, as our diagnoses change. And then at a point when we're diagnosed with advanced illness or frailty, regardless of our age, that's when the Colorado MOST, which is part of the National Pulse program, is appropriate. So it's not necessarily that the pulse or the MOST form should be on a specific time, but instead it really is, for individuals who have serious underlying chronic medical conditions that put them at higher risk of potentially having treatments offered or done to them that don't align with their life values, goals, and preferences. Because as you can see here at the bottom, the ultimate hope is that all of these conversations and the communication that these forms help with should result in treatment wishes being honored. So here are a few resources and websites that I've mentioned in this presentation. The Conversation Project Boulder County is very active, including today on National Healthcare Decisions Day. They are offering free counseling for individuals who want to have a one-on-one conversation about, advanced care planning wishes, and then what form might be right for me, and what can my next steps be in connecting with the people I love and healthcare team members. There are also easy to read advance directives available from a collaborator, Rebecca Sidori, available at prepareforyourcare.org. And if you're someone who's been savvy on social media and following the press, Prepare for Your Care has new videos, especially related to COVID. So that might be something if you want to learn more and watch some videos and be able to sit down with family, and even over whatever technology, you could watch videos together as a means of starting a conversation. So that's prepareforyourcare.org. And then, of course, Civic is doing a wonderful job bringing together multiple resources. So please always circle back to Civic's website to learn more information, especially about the Colorado MOST program. I wanted to add just a little bit here, because sometimes there are questions about what is palliative care and how is it different than hospice. Palliative care is a team-based, human, whole, rounded support team that can happen at any time for individuals upon diagnosis with a serious illness. You can see the domains that are listed there, where this team-based approach often includes not just attention to physical symptoms, but also emotional, spiritual, cultural aspects of care, social and family needs and preferences, as well as legal and ethical issues, and then can provide help with communication and decision-making, including whether there are particular needs related to end-of-life care and support. The figure on the right suggests that at the time of diagnosis, it can be appropriate to start palliative care, where you can see it's that smaller amount, maybe less of our focus at the very beginning of a diagnosis is on palliative care, and it really can increase and ebb and flow over time at the same time that we're pursuing disease-directed therapies. So it's not all or none. Sometimes people think, well, if I start palliative care, that means I'm stopping everything else. And that's not true. We really hope that we can have palliative care integrated in with the general medical treatment that you're doing. I think palliative care is highly beneficial in attending to our whole person needs and our whole family needs, especially with care partner support. And then hospice is one aspect of palliative care. And so a question comes up is, when is hospice right for me? And I've listed out some just sort of flags that you could think about and reflect on with family and your care providers, asking these questions. When is hospice right? Well, it's appropriate when you have heard input from your medical providers that the curative therapy is no longer beneficial. It doesn't help you to reach your goals, won't change the outcome of your underlying terminal diagnosis. There's recognition that your life expectancy is less than 6 months from a diagnosis, especially in the context of other chronic medical conditions that may be also present. Hospice is also right when a person's focus of care is on comfort and symptom management. And then importantly, also when hospice can help provide support at home and the place where the individual lives, including in different residential living facilities. Hospice does really well at helping to provide that support where we are. And it's also helpful in that we don't have to call 911, and even we choose and we recognize that hospital-based care is no longer something that helps us to reach our life goals. So with that, this has been, here's an outline of the different things that I've shared over this webinar. And now I'll turn it back over to Kari, who will moderate any questions or discussion that we are interested in having.
Thank you so much, Hillary. We did have one question come in from Kristen. We recently had a couple reach out to us about how to ensure their most form MDPOA and advanced directives would be followed. One of the couple is in treatment for late stage cancer and has been told that providers have no obligation to follow the forms and that the provider would be opening themselves up to liability for adhering to a form that didn't align with best medical practice. How should they proceed?
Wow, that is very, very tricky. Gosh, I hear the distress of the individuals that reached out. And there's a lot of misinformation there. So I think that, in my mind, it's very clear that as medical providers, we need to be looking at the person in front of us, and if they have decision-making capacity, we need to really be hearing them. Secondly, their medical power of attorney. We really need to be listening well to the instructions that they're giving based on conversations and the person's values that they're speaking up for. Third, the advanced directives, which provide instructions, and the most form are things that we follow. Specifically, yeah, so that is really distressing to me and reflects that there are so many continuing barriers to trust and end-of-life care, or even care in the context of serious illness, where someone may not have as much decision-making capacity as they would like to have, and when perhaps also people just don't feel empowered and that they are heard. I mean, that's really distressing. I would encourage anyone who feels that way, to ask for palliative care. Palliative care or a social worker as part of the team might have, well, would have, but might be the practical way of increasing that person and family's advocacy and confidence, and clearing up perhaps communication challenges. Kristen, I'd love if you have more context or, yeah. I wonder if you have to press *6.
Can you hear me? Try again.
Okay.
Yeah.
So I call in because it overwhelms my internet if I am on the audio on the computer. This couple called us. Actually, Rocky Mountain Cancer Centers referred them to us to get more information. Rocky Mountain Cancer Centers was not the ones that gave them this feedback. They were very, very well educated as far as what their rights were and how to go about sort of making their wishes known. I was very impressed with them, actually. But it was the wife who called me. Her husband, it has late stage cancer. They're both of very appropriate, have complete decision-making capacity, but had a really hard time getting doctors to respect what they had outlined. At that point in time, they had a medical decision-making power of attorney, and they had their advance directives. They did not have a MOST form in place. So I recommended that they get in touch with the palliative care team and complete a MOST form and keep one on them at all times, as well as make sure that all of their providers had a copy of the forms in their records, but just to be carrying them around at all times, because they were very concerned about if something happened and an ambulance was called, not having their wishes followed, because they'd heard that different providers have different obligations based on the MOST form. The ambulance providers weren't under the same onus to adhere to them. So it was a rough call. She was very frustrated and it really didn't feel heard, but they were a very well-educated couple, and considering they were coming from that high level of understanding, I fear for those who don't have that much understanding of the process.
I think that makes, yeah, I highly support the guidance that you gave to them, and also listening and hearing them. Maybe another brainstorming would be, do they have any healthcare provider that they do feel that they could trust and would help advocate for them? In my role as a primary care physician, I would definitely offer that if this, in a situation where individuals are very concerned that they won't be heard, that they have a lot of distress, I would make myself available to talk with other healthcare providers, regardless of the system, so that I could, of course, I'm not acting as the medical durable power of attorney, but can try to come alongside as an advocate to say, these are consistent wishes, this is their decision-making capacity, and this is why, and to try to assist with advocacy.
Well, if they call back, I will definitely recommend that they connect with their primary care doc. That's a great idea. Thank you.
Do we have other questions? I did have one, Hillary. We keep getting questions about, since we are all sort of remote, how do we get signatures on documents? You had mentioned one of your documents is a fillable form, which is wonderful. Do you have other recommendations for how we can transfer those documents legally to make sure they're valid and have signatures if we're not able to see people in person?
Yeah, this is evolving, and I think different healthcare systems, especially for the MOST form, and different even clinics within health systems, are working on creative ways to address how to get both a person's signature on the MOST form as well as the provider's signature. and I think those are, on one hand, individuals will know what the process is for the most form signature by asking in the context of a clinical visit. So on one hand, in the context of this public webinar, there is not going to be one size fits all, because that discussion happens between a person and their healthcare provider. And so that healthcare provider's clinic or setting is going to be able to navigate that process. I've certainly heard of examples of, a provider who has the form. I even have some right here, that as I do clinical telehealth, I fill them out on my side. Actually, I'm creating 2 of them. I put my signature on it. I put the person's information. I mail it to them. I ask them to sign and put it on their refrigerator. I ask them to sign the second one and send it back to our clinic, and then we upload it into medical records. An intermediate step is also I am making a copy of what I send and even putting that into medical records. That's probably not fully legal, fully executed. However, as a healthcare provider, I'm going to do everything I can so that my colleagues can know what discussions have happened, because so I want someone to be able to look at my clinical note and even in the electronic health record to see that I wrote on the most form, discussed during this telehealth visit, and they can see my signature. And so to, just have the breadcrumbs. I recognize that it's not fully executed, but in my mind, something is better than nothing. However, that is just, my opinion as one provider, but it is in recognition that we don't currently in Colorado, or at least within the systems that I work in, have access to an electronically fillable most forms. We're actively working on how we can navigate that in a way that is feasible, timely, accurate, valid, has reasonable user processes on both the person side as well as the healthcare system side. So all of those needs make it actually a complex issue.
Thank you. I know those are tough questions. So I'm going to go ahead and unmute everyone if there are questions. Do we have any questions on the phone? A quiet bunch today. Well, if anyone has any other questions, that we are certainly able to take those questions. Feel free. Sorry, something came in on the chat. I got excited for a minute. But thank you so much for everyone joining us today. Thank you, Hillary, for your presentation. I thought it was wonderfully done. A great overview and lots of great information. So as mentioned, this is being recorded and will be uploaded to the Civics event resources page. I'll also get an email to all of the participants on this webinar, and feel free to reach out to either Hillary or myself, and we'd be happy to answer those. Any last thoughts, Hillary?
I am encouraged by how many people are open to having these conversations, are wondering, what can I do? And there's, I think, a community readiness. So if we all just continue to ask about this and can share knowledge, because we know a little bit about it and know where to point someone for resources, it's encouraging.
Well, thank you so much, and have a great afternoon, everyone. Stay safe out there in the snow if you have to go out. Bye.